And finally, the last factor that we're going to go over here is breech loading, whether or not your handgun can be breech loaded. Now, what is the breech? So on a barrel, you've got the muzzle is the business end. The muzzle is where the bullet exits. The breech is where the bullet enters. So muzzle and breech. Now, most handguns cannot be breech loaded. I mean, technically they can, because I can always open this Glock, take a cartridge, happens to be a dummy cartridge, and insert it into the breech and close the slide, and now it is ready to fire. I can do that. Do I want to? Is there any purpose to doing that? No. In fact, some people argue that making the extractor go over the rear rim of the cartridge is hard on it. They don't recommend doing that. However, it just doesn't make any sense. So, and that's not what the purpose of a breech loader is. There's no special advantage to loading from the back. The reason for breech loading to exist is ergonomic. So if you have advanced arthritis, or if you have very little strength in your hands, the strength required to cock a pistol can be difficult. What do I mean? Well, obviously we have our magazine, we have our pistol, and now you've got to get the magazine in the pistol and seat it properly. And now to cock it, you've got to pull back on the slide. I'm just going to take a wild guess. This probably requires 15 to 16 pounds of force. And then you got to be able to hold it long enough, in the rearward position to make sure it's all the way back, and then release it to let it cock the pistol. Now, for somebody young or in their any sort of physical fitness or physically fit realm, that's not going to be difficult, or especially not impossible. However, for some people, some very vulnerable people, or perhaps people who need a concealed handgun more than anybody else, that might not be possible. For those people, I recommend breech loading. So breech loading can be seen most clearly on a revolver. You pop the cylinder out, you put the bullets in the back, you close the cylinder. You just breech loaded. It required just a couple pounds of force compared to 15 or 16 on something like this. However, there are semi-automatic pistols that allow breech loading. For example, with this little tiny Beretta. So the same way with any pistol, you would load the magazine and then you insert the magazine. And now you have two options rather than just one option. The first option is, like any other, you pull the slide back to cock and to chamber around. Now this required even more force because it's got a tighter recoil spring than the big Glock. And there's less surface area to get your hand on, so it's actually more difficult. However, the other option you have is to use this little lever to extend the barrel to make it possible to breech load. See that? And then you would take your round, put it directly in the barrel, and once it's in, then you push down. And there again, that requires about as much physical force as it requires to close the cylinder on a revolver. And now to make this gun ready for firing, you would simply pull the hammer back and then put the safety on if you're going to carry it concealed. Now, I've got a lot of problems with this little handgun for concealed carry for a whole lot of reasons I'm not going to go into here. Suffice it to say, this is at the extreme lower end of a Tier 2 handgun. I don't recommend it. However, if you simply don't have the physical strength to manipulate the slide of a big Tier 1 semi-automatic handgun such as a Glock, like either of these, or even a Tier 2 semi-automatic handgun like this Ruger LCP, which is twice the handgun that this Beretta is, then you don't really have any other choice except to go with something that allows breech loading. Now I will say, and I'm going to end on this piece of advice, if you don't have the physical strength or the dexterity to manipulate a slide, if you can't carry a gun any bigger than a Ruger LCP, if you're thinking about going to something even smaller, such as this Beretta, don't do it. Just simply go for a J-frame 38 Special or 357 Magnum revolver. Just go with the revolver.